My name is Pat Murphy. I'm Head of Knowledge Transfer with Teagasc based in Johnstown Castle. Environmental regulation poses some risks to the achievement of Food Harvest 2020. There are a number of risks to the achievement of the targets set out in Food Harvest 2020 from the implementation of environmental legislation and environmental policy. The most serious one relates to our greenhouse gas emissions. Farming greenhouse gases represent 30%, almost 30% of our total greenhouse gas emissions in Ireland. The prospects for reducing them in the context of achieving Food Harvest 2020 targets is very low. In fact, the likelihood is that there will be a small increase in emissions. This is unlikely to be acceptable at a policy level, where the overall targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions could be in the order of 30% if predicted policies come into place. This will put the achievement of Food Harvest 2020 targets in severe jeopardy, and there is a likelihood of policy measures to try and limit greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture. There is a very strong policy framework in relation to water quality that is beginning to have impact in relation to improved water quality. Over the last 10 years we've seen a stabilisation of our water quality, but we do face challenging targets to bring all water bodies to good status by 2027. This will require increased vigilance on the part of farmers and improved performance in terms of nutrient management. However, if we don't achieve improvements in our water quality by 2015, there is a likelihood of more stringent implementation of regulation. This could take the form of higher national requirements. It could take the form of a more localised focus on water bodies that are not achieving the good status, or it could, in worst case scenario, lead to the loss of derogation, which would severely impact on our ability to achieve our growth targets in Food Harvest 2020. This is a real risk. It's one that we should be able to mitigate against. If, as an industry, we take on board the requirements and the best practice in relation to water quality, we should be in a position to achieve the targets that are being set for us. There is another way of looking at this. As well as legislation and environmental legislation being a risk to the achievement of Food Harvest 2020, there is the question that can be asked is, what risk does the Food Harvest 2020 present to the environment? We are talking about an increased level of output, an increased stocking rates. The potential that land that was farmed extensively up to now will be brought into intensive production. This has implications. There will be an increased load of nutrient nationally to achieve the levels of performance that we're talking about. There will be a potential reduction in land which would have had high biodiversity characteristics. This can have some impact, but I think with best practice we will be in a position to ensure that with better knowledge amongst farmers of the issues relating to biodiversity, greenhouse gas and soils, that we can achieve Food Harvest 2020 without significant loss of these valuable environmental assets. As regarding farmers who have come out of REPS, to this point there isn't a massive change in their farming practice and an increase in productivity. But as the possibility for increasing milk production comes on stream, and as we try to reach the targets set out in some of the other sectors, there is a possibility that these farmers will start to farm more intensively. But in Ireland as a whole, our nutrient levels, our level of farming is not hugely intensive, and there is still scope to increase that intensity in many areas without damage to the environment. There is a natural limit to the farmer's ability to increase intensity at the moment, in that we have a limited number of beef and dairy cows to supply the raw material for the beef industry. Post 2015 we are likely to see an increase in dairy production and dairy numbers, likely to be a shift from suckler cows to dairy cows, and an overall increase in the number of animals there. There will also, we hope, be a shift of land towards forestry and towards bioenergy, which will mean that the land base on which the traditional enterprises of dairy, sheep and beef will be restricted, and the levels of output per unit area will increase. It will be better to have a balance. If we can increase our forestry area, we sequester significant quantities of greenhouse gases. That will act as a balancing act to an increased intensity on our grassland producing beef and dairy produce. To summarise, environmental regulation does pose a risk to the achievement of Food Harvest 2020. We do not know at this stage, particularly in relation to greenhouse gases, what exactly the level of that risk is. In the meantime, it is vital that farmers do what they can to improve environmental outcomes in relation to greenhouse gases, in relation to water quality, in relation to biodiversity, and in relation to the preservation and management of soil, if we're to try and make sure that these issues do not come back to limit our productive capacity and the achievement of our targets.